Hello everyone, welcome back to Zelf on the Shelf. I'm here with my friend Cindy today.
Hi.
She's a friend and a YouTuber, a new YouTuber, because I've been pestering you to do YouTube for so long.
Yeah, a novice. I'm like a soft YouTuber.
Yeah, but you have the spirit of YouTube inside of you in a way I don't even have.
I feel like I'm tapping into like my 12-year-old self that was just like destined to be a star.
Were you like one of those like vloggers as a kid? Not like...
No, I got a video camera I asked for a video camera for Christmas when I was, like 12. And I got it. And it was like this giant one with like a giant screen. And then you could like flip it around or whatever. Yeah, I would take like video, like hidden cameras, leave like a camera around in my household and...
Slay. Me and Cindy go way back. Fun fact. We met at BYU. We were both dating people at BYU, right?
Yes.
And
the Provo experience.
We had the Provo experience. We were girlfriends in Provo, even though I was going to school in Idaho, but I would come down for the weekend to see my boyfriend at the time. And then Cindy's boyfriend was his roommate. So we kind of had a very temporary little foursome going on and matching J. Crew elbow patch sweaters.
Yes.
And Cindy, as far as I could tell, was like the epitome of a Mormon girl goddess, like truly perfect. I remember when you came, because I used to stay, I think with you, when every time I'd come down.
In my little shithole apartment.
Yeah, with the weird bathroom that was like a weird like changing room.
I have the most vivid memory of us doing our makeup
Me
in
too.
that bathroom.
And I have I don't know why, I just have such a vivid memory of you coming back from like a Christmas break or something and your hair just looked unreal. Like
Probably
this
like freshly
was
bleached.
Yes, this was my dream hair since childhood. And I was like, oh my God, your hair looks so good. And you were like, thanks, I just got some highlights when I was back home. And that was the moment where I was like, highlights, huh? That's something you can do. And it just like formed me. It's probably the reason I'm blonde today, because I was like, that's what I need to become.
I love that. And now I'm a redhead.
And look at you now, a sinful redhead.
Yes. Phoenix rising from the ashes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking a little bit about Cindy's story today, because genuinely when I first heard like kind of your full Mormon deconstruction story, I thought it was one of the most interesting ones I've ever heard, because it has a lot of themes that you don't always necessarily hear, but then a lot of relatability in it.
I'm excited to share more about it. I'm insufferable and I love talking about it.
Well, I guess in like Mormon story style, do you want to just start out by telling us a little bit about like your Mormon upbringing leading you to kind of the main thing of what we're going to talk about today, which is more your deconstruction?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Southern California, and I had 10 siblings, and my family was very much kind of, not sought after, that's not the right phrase, but like you were kind of saying, like the epitome of like a Mormon, the Mormon dream, yes. Yeah. They're all very conventionally
I've seen all your sisters, like you're all gorgeous gene pool.
Yeah. And all of them are Mormon and all of them are like doing what they're supposed to be doing. And like my dad was bishop for 6 years and it was just, we had like a permanent row, in the chapel every Sunday. So yeah, it was just a given that that's the path, like the life path that I was going to go on. And then I experienced a lot of severe childhood trauma that completely altered my brain chemistry. So something like religion was like a drug to me. Like as I grew up, like I realized like, oh, if I do these things, then I'll be able to finally feel like safe and accepted. And so like my mentally ill self really like latched onto that.
Same.
And then when I was in college,
It's probably fine, but
I decided to go on a mission.
I always forget that you're a missionary as well. Like you were the perfect Mormon girl.
That's when you met me, when I came home from my mission.
Yeah.
That's where I met my ex-husband.
And normally like the stereotype, because you were a 21-year-old return missionary.
Yes.
Yeah. And the stereotype at the time was that, like the hottest Mormon girls don't go on missions, even though that was obviously like not necessarily true and changing, but I was just like, she's been on a mission.
That's kind of the vibe that I got too. It was like, oh, the frumpy or like homely girl.
Yeah.
Like that's just
so
kind of
fucked up.
The culture that was instilled in my brain. But I feel as though because it wasn't super common for girls to be going at that time, and because I had no identity really of myself and I just didn't know who I was, and you know what I mean, but I felt like making that decision to go on a mission, I was like, I'm doing this and like I'm gonna do something different, and I'm deciding this all on my own to go. And I still feel really great about just going on a mission. And I mean, it was a great experience for me. And so when I came home...
Where'd you go?
I went to Northern Virginia, so Washington, D.C. South mission. Yeah. But when I got home, it just made my scrupulosity like times 20. Like it was just really...
Like having gone on the mission?
Yes.
Was it like that on the mission? Like you just became really...
Yeah. Because like I was a great missionary. Like people looked up to me and were like, oh, Sister Crockett, like, oh, she's this. And I was like, oh, like I can get validated. Like they're validating me. And I wanted my mission president's approval so badly. And
yeah, daddy.
Oh my God. Yes. Like I was just on a high after I came home. And I was like, I have one mission, and that is to get married. That is my next mission in life. And I had literally no relationship experience at all. Nothing.
You didn't date at all before your mission?
Not at all.
Even though you were so beautiful. Was it because you just
I
didn't
thought I was the
want
ugliest
to?
person ever. Like I never felt beautiful until I went to rehab, which we'll get into. But
mind blowing.
No, literally when I was 30 and I went to rehab and I was like, oh, like I'm attractive. And like it's crazy because you look at the before and after of when I went in and it's like, there's so much more light to my face and like confidence. But anyway, so I get married and we get married in the temple. I mean, picture perfect, blonde Mormon couple.
Yeah. I was like, that's it. That's it. That's what life's about. Those two right there.
We were like a couple that people would ask like, oh, married or siblings? Like,
yeah. Just so beautiful. And
blonde hair, blue eyes.
Yeah.
Being married was an interesting experience. It's so fascinating to think about the experiences I've had with romantic partners now and compared to a Mormon marriage.
And your first relation?
My first relation, my first kiss.
Wow.
Yes.
So did you immediately, like after becoming a married, was it like an immediate shock how different that was? Because I feel like you obviously sold this fairy tale. Or did the fairy tale kind of like stay alive for a bit? My personal experience with being married, it never felt like a fairy tale. Like I never felt like we had like a honeymoon stage. It was just always a struggle. But because I was so in the mindset of, well, the things that God wants you to do are often hard. Yeah. And you have to struggle for it. Okay. And you have to make sacrifices. And so because our relationship was kind of difficult, it was like, but that like reaffirmed my belief that I was doing the right thing. Because, trials and tribulation and it's like, oh, Satan's trying to fight against this, that kind of vibe. Did you, like, within, like, the first week or so of marriage think, like, oh, well, this is really different than I thought? Or did that not even really? No, because I didn't have any expectations because I had no idea what a relationship was supposed to look like. I had never seen a healthy, like, marriage or relationship, of people close to me. So it was just kind of, I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. But I just always felt so unsettled and just so like I was trying so hard to fit into that box of like a Mormon wife and supporting her husband. And then I became a stay-at-home mom. I had 2 children. After I had my first daughter, I started having like really vivid flashbacks of my childhood abuse. And that kind of... For the first time. Yeah. Was it completely absent from your memory before that, or you just kind of never went there? Throughout my childhood, because it happened when I was very young, like ages 5, 6, and 7, that's at least what my mind remembers. I'm sure there's things that I blocked out. Throughout childhood, it would like come to my mind, but I was always questioning it. Like, is this real? Like, is this memory real? Like, that's weird. Like, that's just so confusing. So confusing. You just didn't have a place for it to go. No. But I started thinking about it more when I was around 11 or 12 and my abuser was in his early 20s and he was trying to go on a mission. And what ended up happening was I was brought into a room with a family member and my abuser. And basically the family member was like, I didn't know that he did this to you. I had no idea. And I had literally no context for what we did together when I was 5. None at all. So, and my abuser is sobbing in the corner. I just felt so confused, so scared. And I just kept saying, it's fine. I love him. Like, I love him. It's fine. That was like a cataclysmic, is that how you say it? Event. Because it was found out about. But then it was like a 5-7 minute conversation. And I left. And again, I'm 12 years old. In a giant family, right? As
In
well.
a giant family,
so it's not
giant
like you got
house.
a ton of like one-on-one time
No,
with
never.
parents or
No,
anything
never,
like that.
never. If a parent wanted to talk to me, it was never really a good thing. And then he left on his mission like 3 days later.
And that was it? Like
that was it.
You were just kind of left to
that was
just
it.
sit with that forever.
It was never spoken about again until I started unveiling all of it when I was 27.
So is 27 when you had your first daughter?
Yes. It was also around the time of the Me Too movement. And I had never been able to put words or labels to what I went through when I was so young. And, it was a massive movement, like across the globe. Like it was just.
Yeah, you couldn't go on social media without seeing it.
Exactly, yeah. And I started thinking and remembering so much. I'm like, oh, I experienced this. I have. And it's just the classic experience of once you kind of start remembering one experience, then it just, everything else kind of comes to the surface. And yeah.
This is all happening, with a newborn? Or
Yes,
wow.
with a newborn. Yeah.
That's so destabilizing.
Yes, and the experience of becoming a mother was also incredibly triggering because now I have this daughter and I'm thinking how old I was when these really horrible things happened to me. And I just couldn't fathom that. And then just, becoming a mother is like, it's such a mind fuck. And I always describe it as it's this job that is so coveted. Like everybody talks about this job in Mormonism of being a mother. Like that is the ultimate goal for a woman. And even if you can't have kids, you can be a mother in other ways. And it's like, how about women don't have to be mothers at all?
Yeah, how about it?
Like to anyone. It's this job that's so sought after. People talk about it all the time. Like, this will be your greatest calling. It'll bring you so much purpose and yada, yada, yada. And I'm coming from a family of 11 children. My mom was home all the time. So I witnessed that and I just figured that that's what I was supposed to do. But then you get the job and it's a million times harder than anybody let on. And you've signed a contract for life, like to stay at that job. And if you decide to leave that job, your clients, your kids will be irrevocably changed.
Yeah.
And
you're still a child because you're a 27-year-old Mormon girl.
Yes.
So you're like in your girl. This is what I just like. The darkness of this like hits me harder than most things of just like women while they're still in girlhood being told to have kids. You'll never get that back. You can't go back. So you're being like robbed of your girlhood before you've had the like time to like properly develop out of it into the new role of mother. Like you're taking on like mother as a literal like job before you've actually like been able to step into the archetype of mother, if that makes sense.
Right. Like I didn't even know how to be a mother to myself. Because I lacked a lot of functional guidance growing up in my family. So legally I was an adult when I started having kids, but mentally I hadn't unpacked anything from my childhood, anything. And I feel as though Mormonism, they push women getting married so quickly. It's almost like a psychological thing where they want them to be trapped as soon as possible.
Yeah. They don't want them like waking up to their own power.
No.
It's better to take it away from them before they even become aware of it.
Yeah. And while their brains are literally still developing, and so many women who get married really young, like they're stunted. If you experienced trauma, I mean, in my opinion, being part of a cult, it's just traumatic in and of itself.
Is mostly traumatic for everyone.
Of course it affects everybody differently, but we're all just emotionally stunted. And then if you don't work through those things and then you get trapped in a marriage and then you get trapped in this world, you end up being a middle-aged woman who can't connect with her daughters or who can't connect with her children. Like how many times do you see that in Mormonism? And then those mothers, it's like, they've been robbed of an entire life.
You're 27, you're waking up a little bit.
Yeah.
How's that factoring into your ability to like be a mother? Like how are you surviving that?
Dissociating. Like straight up dissociating and trying to mold to whatever kind of mom people wanted me to be, but it just never really took Like it just was never, I was just lacking in so much stability and rational thinking. I had, my second daughter, and at that time,
How much later was that?
I was 29.
Okay, yeah.
I was 29.
So you had those memories reset. Did you just kind of like stuff all that back down and be like, I should have another kid? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And honestly, just being totally frank, I wanted the attention again. Having a child gives you attention from other people.
I always think about that with Mormon women. It's kind of one of the only ways you get truly celebrated and get the kind of validation that we all kind of need, like often.
Right. But it's just crazy because babies don't stay babies forever. The older that they get, the bigger their problems get. And it's almost like I wanted to be taken care of again. And obviously I wanted to have children in some way, but I just didn't grasp the gravity of it. Like having children is the single most influential job that you can have. And you're literally raising a person to go out into the world and then affect other people. Like it's the single most, and it's just talked about so flippantly, like not only in Mormonism, but just in general. But
yeah, people will be like, oh, I want to have my kids 2 years apart because this, and this. And I'm just like, but just having a 2-year-old alone, like just imagining the task of taking care of a 2-year-old and then being like, let's throw a newborn into the mix. It just seems impossible.
Overstimulation at its fullest.
That's why I really think it's not going to be for me because I just...
And I completely respect that. Anyone that tells me, no, I don't want children, I'm like, I love that for you. Like I support that 100% because I love my girls. Like they are the coolest people I've ever met. And I am raising them in the very best way that I can and hopefully giving them the guidance that I never received as a child. And at the same time, if me now was in that position, I don't know that I would have chosen to have children because me now knows the complexities of my brain and what I have to do to heal it. And that kind of leads into like the next part of me eventually leaving. It was 2020 and I started a mental health account on Instagram, which was like so scary because again, I'm not talking about my childhood abuse to anybody except my husband. Nobody knew about it.
How old is your second daughter by now?
1.
Okay.
Yeah, 1-year-old.
So you're 30. Yeah, I remember you being 30 when you... Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I just craved... I wanted to share. Like, I craved people knowing what happened to me. It was like I was keeping secrets for my whole life, and I was so tired of it. And there was one event that brought my abuse to conversation with a family member. Again, it was never spoken about again after I was 12 and he left on his mission. Yeah, so I start this mental health account and I'm very vaguely talking about my mental health because at the time I'm just barely learning because backing up a little bit, my sister left at the end of 2019 and she's
the church.
Yeah, she left the church at the end of 2019 and that blew my mind because I had never had anyone that close to me leave before. And then that made me start genuinely questioning. And then I was going to therapy. I start this account. And so all these things are taking place. You know, we're not going to church at the physical building anymore. We're watching it on the screen. So there's already this sort of detaching happening from like between me and Mormonism and my scrupulous brain needing to like double down and stay in that box. But once I opened that box a little bit, it was just almost like there was no stopping me in discovering myself and becoming my own person. That led to, in 2021, this girl, she's a vintage shop owner. I don't think she has it anymore, but vintage shop owner in Salt Lake. And she messaged me and because she had started following me and she said, I relate so much to what you have been saying. And I also experienced something really similar in childhood. And I went to a treatment center and she just kind of gave a little message. And as soon as she said, oh, I went to a treatment center, I was like, that is what I have to do. I had never thought about going to a treatment center for mental health because it's usually for addiction.
You don't really hear of people going to treatment for childhood trauma necessarily. But I do feel like that's one of those classic moments that like I just know from my own life when your brain just knows like, that's what I'm going to do. It's like, that was like me when I was like, I'm going to go to BYU, Idaho. Or like, you just know that is the next step on your journey. And like, no one could really talk you out of it. There's like no,
like I have chills even just thinking about it now. And it's interesting because it was a very similar feeling as when I decided to serve a mission. It was like this aha just moment of my whole body just felt like it was just lit up, and I just knew that's what I'm going to do, and I will do whatever it takes to get there.
Yeah.
And so she sent me recommendations for treatment centers, and I was on a plane a week later to go to rehab in Arizona.
That's so wild. It's like your psyche just knows that is the thing.
Yeah, because at that point, before I left, my mental health was coming to a crossroads. Is that what I mean? Or coming to a head, basically.
Yeah.
Because again, unpacking all these things, finally making decisions like not wearing my garments, and I don't want to pay tithing on this and that. And so it fucks with your head. It really fucks with your head. And when you're in a very traditional Mormon marriage, it's also really hard for your partner, like extremely hard, which I completely also respect that experience as well. And because it's just completely different than anything that we'd ever experienced and never thought that we would be going through.
Yeah. It's so traumatizing for both people.
Yes. And
it's like, people will so casually be like, go to therapy. And it's like, yeah, but it's like you were in therapy. It's not like, oh, I have a therapist, so now I'm fine. There's still, like in your case, for example, there was an unraveling that needed to happen. And it's not just this like thing you can contain in a neat box with therapy once a week.
Yes.
It's like if your psyche needs to completely explode, like it's gonna, and it's better that you're in a treatment center when it happens.
Yeah, I called it the untethering. That described the experience perfectly. Just untethering this tie to this really fucked up institution that just made you think that you couldn't be anybody. You couldn't be your own person. It was all for God. It was all for Jesus. And also right before rehab, I was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder.
Which is previously what has been called multiple personality disorder.
Yes, previously multiple personalities. And that was mind-blowing in and of itself. Because it's not just like anxiety and depression, all those things are obviously extremely valid, and I have those things as well. But you don't hear about that diagnosis very often. It's not as commonly talked about as like bipolar or borderline personality disorder. And I feel like it's being talked about a little bit more. And getting a little bit more awareness, which I'm really grateful for, but it's still frustrating because you see like images of, there's been movies or TV shows that will portray someone. A lot of times it's a man with multiple personalities and he's murdering people.
Of course.
Like that is kind of the image that at least came to my mind when I thought of that, or when I've kind of told people in the beginning, they're like, oh.
I heard that in the 70s, a ton of women started getting diagnosed with multiple personality disorder. But in that case, it was all of these like depressed housewives who like, understandably under patriarchy in the 70s, like hated their lives. But they were like there was such a high expectation for them to be this one specific thing. And, like mental health for women back then, if you're not that thing, then they'll just drug you or they'll send you away or whatever. There's no space for like childhood trauma or anything like that. So it's just like, she must have multiple personalities. But apparently it was like this thing that was getting really overdiagnosed in the 70s as like a way to just like explain away women's hysteria, like so classic.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I've never heard that. Kind of reminds me of like the Salem witch trials. Like
yeah.
It's like this.
Like throughout history, we just come up with different ways to be like, that's why that woman's like that.
Women and to label them as crazy.
Yeah.
And unstable.
Yeah.
Because women are supposed to just
if they're not
so
what we want them to be, then they're crazy.
Yes.
They're wrong.
Anytime they step outside of the realm of what men think they're supposed to be, it's like, oh no, honey. Like you're not supposed to
Yeah.
No. You're just ill.
Yeah.
You're just ill and you need to be drugged. You need to be just treated, and you need to just keep all of that in just a little tight box and just forget about it. Which is why I think when women start recognizing their power and take it back, there really is no stopping them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because it's so all encompassing, like it makes so much sense to me that you would need to go to treatment because, regardless of how much you love your husband and kids, it's like they're all tied to it. Like it's all tied in with Mormonism because every decision you've made your entire life is tied in with Mormonism, and every decision, like your attachment to Mormonism is so tied into your childhood trauma. And it's like, there's no getting away from one piece without getting away from all of it almost.
Oh, absolutely. You know, like we've talked about, my abuse is directly tied to the church. It was hidden because of the church, because of this pressure of this person needing to go on a mission instead of getting help or me getting help. And yeah, so 2021, I get that diagnosis. My mental health is just getting so bad. I started self-harming, and that's what I used to do in high school. And that was a big deal because like I hadn't done it in years. But it makes so much sense. It makes so much sense because on the one hand, I'm like, oh, I'm becoming like my own person. And then on the other hand, I have all these elements that are trying to make that not happen.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly feeling guilty for becoming my own person. I'm constantly feeling like that's not allowed and that's wrong and sinful. And I hated myself. I hated the changes that I was causing in my family. I just didn't like myself. And so that was my drug of choice. But yeah, I had never heard of anyone going to treatment for mental health reasons. And I want to acknowledge that I am extremely privileged for the amount of help that I've gotten, the amount of therapy that I've gotten. I mean, I went to a bougie ass rehab center. Like celebrities were going there. There were celebrities there when I was there. And not everybody can do that. Like most people can't do that. And to leave my 4-year-old and 2-year-old, that is like unheard of for a young mother to do that. And I just always want to acknowledge that because that's not accessible to the majority of that.
Yeah, like it's a privilege, but it is also what you deserved. Like as much as it should be accessible for everyone, you know. And also it's highlighting another just messed up thing with groups like Mormonism encouraging women to get married and have kids while they're still in girlhood and like haven't reckoned with their own trauma and stuff, is then you have all the, like you have responsibilities to these 2 little girls, but like for you to be able to like become self-actualized as a human, as a mother, you have to had to like to some degree abandon them. And that's not your fault. That's not your fault. You got like roped into that system. And by the time you started waking up, you have all these responsibilities. So it's like, it's just so common that we shame women for that. But it's like, it's not their fault. They were oppressed and then they woke up one day.
It's so hard for the layman to grasp that in a single conversation of, I left my 2 young children and I went to rehab.
For how long did you go?
42 days.
42.
I was supposed to be there for 30, but things were so intense that I had to extend my stay. And honestly, I would have stayed longer. But I just felt like I can't leave my children for that much longer. Like I probably could have been there for like at least 3 months. But it is what I deserved. And I feel incredibly grateful. And my family supported me financially to be able to do that. I still feel shame about it in some way. I've been able to like release a lot of it, but just shame about doing that, leaving my kids. I mean, a Mormon housewife. I don't know. It just wasn't, I had never seen anyone like me doing that.
Yeah, it is uncommon. Again, this is why I feel like your story is kind of unique.
Yeah, and I think that's why I love talking about it, so that I can share that perspective that so many women come from, but it's really difficult to talk about and normalize. So yeah, I went to rehab in Arizona. I mean, I went in there with a few things on the forefront of my mind. One, I wasn't sure what I was going to do about being a member of the church. I'm still very much questioning, but in my gut, I was like, I'm not going to leave the church.
Right,
I'm
like
not
you'll
going to
figure
leave
it out.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
but I just felt so confused. And then, of course, my childhood abuse, that was like the main thing that I went there for. And I was married when I went into rehab. Had no intention of getting a divorce at all.
Did you like enjoy being there? I guess is sort of my first question. Did you get there and kind of feel like a sense of relief? Like, okay, I'm on a different journey and they can help me here?
It was heaven. I loved every minute of it, besides, the first day that I got there, so it was a residential treatment center. There's different levels as far as when they go somewhere for an extended time, for either addiction or, to rehab centers. I was first put in I can't remember what it's called. Oh, like inpatient. I don't remember the correct term, but it was a lot more, that there was a lot less that you could do. It was basically like where the high level issues like stayed the whole time.
Okay.
But in order to transfer to the residential part of the center, you had to stay in that just to make sure that you were stable enough.
Got it.
Because in residential, you can do lots of other activities. And does that make sense?
Yeah, like you have more privileges once you...
Yeah, and they have to
prove your
understand,
sanity.
what meds you're on, and they have to make sure, And I remember that first day of getting there, and it makes me really emotional talking about it just because I don't talk about it very often. But I get there, and there's this group of people. They're also patients like me, and they're all eating dinner. And I was told, "Okay, it's dinner time. So this will be the first thing that you do." And I, like, terrified. Like, I was so, I don't know. I was so scared. How I'm supposed to go and like talk to these people and what are they addicted to? Like, I don't know. I'm just this little Mormon girl. Like, I have no idea what I'm getting into. And I remember calling my husband because I was able to make one phone call. It was like being in jail. Like, I was able to make one phone call when I got in, and I was just like, I'm here. And I was just a shell of a human being. My face was just so, my countenance, God, I hate that word because it's so tied to Mormonism, but it was so gray. There was just this grayness, like cloudiness to me. But I very quickly felt just at home because in a way it's like a vacation for a young mother.
I was going to say, well, not to diminish like the real work that you're doing in there, but I could imagine it having a bit of like a camp feel where everything's sort of taken care of for you. And again, just thinking about how you like grew up in this giant family where you don't get a lot of like individual attention. And suddenly it's like, these people are like here to take care of me.
Yes.
And we're all kind of in this boat together. I could imagine that being fun.
Yes, yeah.
As hard as it would be.
And it's so interesting because like I feel like there's so many parallels between my rehab experience and my mission, which sounds so weird, but I was so amped up and confident and sure of both of those decisions that once I got there and got into the swing of things, it was like, I was the best version of myself. I just felt so alive. And I think it also helps because going into a place where no one knows me, not a single person, and I get to be whatever I want. I get to be whoever I want. I didn't bring any garments, like none at all. And it was such a relief to know that I was there for myself.
And so insane to think that it took you, again, you'd been in therapy, you're 30, you have 2 kids, and it took you going to rehab to get that type of freedom for the first time ever. Yeah. Like women in Mormonism just like don't get access to it. And it's like this like luxury you got by virtue of rehab.
It's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad. I was actually just talking to my friend about it yesterday. And when I said something about, going to rehab, it was just, it was so nice to like be able to just take care of myself. And she was like, that makes me sad for that version of you that felt like you never got that.
Yeah.
You never got to have really time on your own.
Next, you're with your parents, and then you're like in college or going on a mission, and then you're married.
Yep.
Like, when's it supposed to happen?
And here's the start of the rest of your life.
Yeah, and that's what the church wants. They don't want any gaps.
Nope. They don't want to give you time to think. They
Yeah.
don't even want to give you time to breathe. It's like, let's get you married off. Let's get you shipped off. To the rest of your life of repression and
Shallow breathing.
Yes, and shame.
Yeah.
But once I got into the residential part of the center, again, I mean, I really can't express how much I thrived so quickly. And it's true now, although now I have to be in charge of it on my own. I thrived off of someone giving me a schedule of everything I'm doing that day.
Yeah.
These are the rules, very much like a mission. These are the rules that you have to follow. Here's what you're going to be doing today. Every single day, somebody handed me a schedule of what I was doing. When I was eating, provided food. Like, I never thought about what food I was eating, like what to make for dinner. I mean, I had an entire team taking care of me. I had, even so far as like a naturopathic program, and then a traditional Western medicine program. And so,
and it's probably beautiful where you were, right? Well, I'm guessing that.
Yes, no, it was, I fell in love with the Arizona desert, and Arizona just has a very special place in my heart. It was very transformative, and because I was there during monsoon season. So it's 110 degrees one day, or even just beginning of the day, and then it's dumping, pouring, absolute like torrential downpour of rain throughout the day. So it was a cool comparison to like what was going on in my mind.
Yeah,
like,
very cleansing.
It was like, okay, like I'm burning things off, and then I'm cleansing, and then it's just this cycle. And it was in Tucson, Arizona. And so it was kind of out in the boonies, so kind of farther away from like the big, like the city part. It was beautiful. And because we were outside of the city, like we could see the storms roll in like super clearly, and it was really, really beautiful.
What was kind of coming up for you, like in rehab, in terms of just like you as a woman and Mormonism, and you have this newfound freedom? Is that making realizations pop up? I'm guessing you're constantly having realizations.
Yes. I remember my first therapy session because I had multiple therapists for different things. Like I had a talk therapist, I had an EMDR therapist, I had a somatic experience therapist. Again,
the dream.
I feel like a spoiled mentally ill person.
No.
I've been spoiled mentally.
Spoiled with mental wellness.
Yes.
Briefly,
which is why it
to
was
heal.
like, which is why it was like heaven for a girl whose brain just hurt so much all the time. And my body, just my whole being just was in so much pain.
And you've never truly like felt taken care of, and yet you're tasked with taking care of two younger girls.
Insurmountable. It was insurmountable for me. I remember my first therapy session with my therapist that I met with the most while I was there. And surprisingly, she was a convert to the church. She said that, and I got kind of turned off and thought, I'm going to get a different therapist because hello, I did not want any of that influence on my journey and,
Yeah. But that is a very bougie place. So I'm guessing she probably, some of the Mormon therapists I hear about from people, it's like they're not leaving their Mormonism at the door for a second. But I imagine to get a job at a place like that, you have to be kind of worth your weight.
Yeah. And she joined the church much later in life, like when she was well into adult, like being like middle-aged.
What a crazy bitch.
Yeah, like, honey, like, I was like, do you need help? Like,
yeah, no wonder you became a therapist.
No, seriously. I told her, kind of what I came in there, what my thoughts were like as I came into rehab. I said the thing about, me struggling, knowing what to do about my membership in the church, and then just my overall, sexuality, my childhood abuse and everything. And she said, you need to put the religion stuff on a shelf. You need to, because you have to figure out the core of who you are before you can add those other things into your life. And that felt like such a relief, because it was like giving me permission to just, because it's so true. It's so true. At that point, I had the Mormon mask on for 30 years. So, but underneath that, there's another person. But I didn't really understand that there was another person.
Yeah.
And for me, there's multiple people.
And trying to figure out like your sense of self while feeling that pressure to like, well, I better stay Mormon because like, my whole life kind of depends on it. Like, how's it going to happen? You can't unravel. You can't like have a true dark night of the soul. I mean, maybe some people can, but yeah, it makes sense that you would need to completely.
Yeah, because I mean, my first memory of literally being alive was being sexually abused. So, I mean, that's where my life starts.
Yeah.
Just that thing that happened to me.
Yeah, and it's not just like, obviously the period of abuse, it's like every single thing throughout your whole life is attached to it.
Yes.
Because you're not like, because it's not healed.
Yeah. And any type of self-development that I tried throughout my life, I connected it all to God and Jesus. Like everything that I would try to do for myself, it was, but I'm actually doing it for Jesus. I'm actually doing it for God. And then you just get lost in the mix. You just get so lost. So she told me to put it on a shelf. So I did. And I had another appointment with her not long after that first one. And I started sharing things about my sexuality and how that tied to my marriage, saying, it was the first person I ever kissed, my first relationship. And I started having these realizations that felt very real for the first time, that I'd been feeling throughout my marriage, just feelings of, and this is nothing to say about the person that I was married to, because we were both Mormon. We were both just figuring things out, and I don't fault him for anything that I was going through. It was just like, it was like little Cindy. It was younger Cindy that was going through these things. So I expressed to her, like, I don't even know if like I am married to the right person, or like I got married so quickly, and started realizing that I just never felt alive sexually. I just felt like there was this part of me that was really untapped because I had no experience. I'd only been with one person. And to be able to admit those things out loud confidently was so unsettling. Like, I just broke down into tears because I didn't want to acknowledge those feelings.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to stay, like, I needed to stay in this Mormon marriage. Like, I needed to stay married. I needed to have a nuclear family. I didn't allow myself to allow those thoughts to be more clear in my head.
I bet that's like so relatable to so many women watching, like that feeling of being in a Mormon marriage and keeping at bay the sort of hidden truth that is like always lurking, which is maybe like, I don't like having sex with my husband, or whatever it is, in that vein.
Yeah. And that was my experience. I just felt like I never, and I hate talking in, all or nothing, but majority, I just did not enjoy sex. Never really had an orgasm like in sex or on my own. That was always a struggle. And makes a lot of sense given my history, so I'm feeling all these things, and I was unraveling at the seams. And I do feel a little bit of shame about this part of my story. But when I've talked to especially women of my same generation that have gone through similar things, they relate heavily to this feeling. It was like when I admitted those things to my therapist, I became so horny.
Just like unlocked in that moment. Yeah.
Yes. A feeling that I had never felt in my life. It was like, I need to kiss somebody right now. Like it just was this tunnel vision of I need to do something about these feelings.
Isn't it funny how just like allowing yourself to admit, like, I haven't ever enjoyed sex can then make you horny? Like, I just think there's so many women in marriages who think like, I might just be kind of asexual, or I don't really like sex.
Right.
But it's so interesting how just like stating a truth confidently out loud can just unlock so much in a moment.
Yeah, yeah. And another part that played into me just feeling very alive sexually, like friends or just people that were working there, whatever, they would say like, you are so beautiful, and compliment me. And I just never allowed myself to believe those things ever. It was mostly, I would believe the negative things that I thought about myself, or, I was heavily teased and bullied growing up for my looks, or for my nose. I got teased for my nose, like, oh, you're like a pig, or like, oh, like,
but it's like a perfect, it's considered like a perfect nose.
And I literally told myself when I was a kid, I'm going to get plastic surgery when I get older. And now, like, jokes on all those people.
That's the nose people get plastic surgery for.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, jokes on you. Or like got teased for my acne. So yeah, I just now, like, I think I'm so beautiful. Like, I love the way that I look, and so it's so crazy to think that at one point I just was not confident in that at all. So I'm having these people, tell me these things. And I decided early on in my stay in rehab that I just said, it's so easy for me to believe the negative things. Why don't I just like flip a switch and start believing these things that people are telling me? So any compliment that anybody gave me, I internalized it. Like it became a part of me. Like these are my core beliefs now. Like I'm going to believe these people. And it's almost like I believed these people more than if people commented on my looks before, because they were strangers. They didn't know anything about me. They didn't care that I was Mormon. They didn't care if I was going to the temple, if I was wearing garments, if I was being just like an angel of a woman. And they were saying how beautiful I was and yada, yada. And it sounds kind of like conceited in a way, but it was such an integral part of my experience.
Yeah. So, and a stepping into reality, which you'd been not allowed to do or not capable of doing.
Yeah. So yeah, I really wanted to kiss somebody. That's literally, I just really, and I even like, I want to have sex with somebody. Like I need to, again, like my body is waking up. Truly, like my female organs they're alive for the first time ever.
Yeah. Yeah. They've been stuffed in this box for so long and then they're free. I mean, I know this is like a challenging thing to talk about and probably to like reflect on because obviously you were married, but I feel like it's kind of a story worth telling because of the nuance of all of that. Like we are animals and we like to think that we can like keep everything like so neat and contained and we can do all our healing even in these neat and contained boxes, but it just isn't the reality in a lot of cases.
And when as a child you are being taken advantage of, my sexuality was never mine. Me expressing myself in that way, it either had to be shamed immediately or it was to serve somebody else.
Yeah.
It was never mine to begin with. I never had that choice ever.
Yeah, you were kind of coerced into giving your sexuality away to a man before you'd even discovered it for yourself.
Yes.
So then it functionally didn't exist.
No, it was something really bad and wrong that happened. It makes a lot of sense. I never dated anybody because I didn't want like men to touch me. Duh. Like I never knew why. But when a boy started liking me, and if I had a crush on a boy and then I find out they start liking me, I'm immediately like, no, because I was just like, don't get too close to me. I don't want you to, just the repression. But so I'm feeling these feelings in rehab and all of this is I feel like people will judge me for this part of the story, but I don't really care.
Generally on this channel, our audience is like, our whole channel is like unshaming and bringing curiosity rather than.
So I'm at home.
I mean,
I'm home
I
here.
think if there's a channel for it, it's this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's obviously going to be like people are going to have opinions, but
yeah, totally. And you know what? This is my experience.
Yeah, it's what happened to you.
This is my life. And my therapist in rehab always said, Cindy, you are not here to like eventually live with God again. You're here to have experiences. Life is, you're here on this earth to experience things. And she kind of even, and I know this is going to sound really weird, but it is interesting. When I started expressing these things about my sexuality, she just said, well, because I was thinking like, well, maybe I should have an open marriage. Like maybe, I started thinking, well, what does that mean for my marriage? Like, what is that if I want to explore, if I want to like be with other people and experience that, like, what does that mean for my relationship? And she even said like, maybe you just do it for yourself. Maybe it's only for yourself. This is your sexuality, which I know sounds...
Did she mean just in rehab or...
From her perspective, she's talking about outside of rehab. But in my mind,
very bold for a therapist.
I thought that she was giving me permission to kiss someone in rehab.
Right, okay.
Like I was a teenager. I was a 30-year-old teenager at that point.
Yeah.
Feeling all these hormones in my body and not knowing what to do with them. I legitimately thought that she was giving me which was huge...
I mean, not like she's advocating for you to go kiss someone in rehab, but
kind of.
Once again, you had entered into relationship agreements without informed consent.
Yes.
And in the same way that you had to put your religion on the shelf because you can't allow like a true unraveling and then a finding and rebuilding of sense of self while you're still trying to fit it in these frameworks that you don't know. Like that's the whole point of finding a sense of self.
I have no idea.
Yeah, you are in like, lest we forget, you're in rehab, diagnosed dissociative identity disorder. Like this isn't it's not a normal situation.
No. So the part of me that was really, really horny, it was full force at that point. And I took what my therapist said and I ran with it. So I started looking around at the men in rehab and I was like, oh, he's cute.
Who am I going to kiss?
Like literally scouting for the person to kiss, which again, sounds crazy. And I'm going to stop with the qualifiers because it's stupid at this point.
And also don't think that the lightness we're bringing to talking about it is in no way to like minimize the very real different reality of like your husband in this situation or, but it is complex.
Exactly. Yeah, so I started looking around and I was like, oh, he's cute. And here's the thing. In rehab, that is a major no.
Oh, yeah.
It is like one of the harshest rules. You cannot have any sort of romantic connection with anyone else.
But because you can have a friend connection.
I'm there with sex addicts. Like I'm there with people with eating disorders, with sex addiction, all sorts of mental illnesses, all sorts of addiction. So yeah, it's very detrimental to your, or at least that's what they taught. It's like it's detrimental to your progress to then engage in that sort of relationship because it distracts you.
You're presumably allowed to be friends with people in the rehab.
And you're not allowed to bring, vibrators. You're not allowed to bring
Really?
No. Like there's so many things that you can't bring. And so everybody's so horny. Like everybody is thinking about sex at some point. This is very specific day. I was in the cafeteria and it wasn't a huge campus. There's probably 100 or so people there at a time. So if someone new came in, like, and the kind of circles that I ran in, it was just, you can tell when someone's new, like someone just got there. So I see this guy and he's having a conversation with someone at one of the tables and I like locked in on him and I thought he was like the most gorgeous boy I've ever seen. And here's the thing about me. I don't know if it's like the Aquarius in me or just me coming alive, but I was so confident in rehab. I was just like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And like, I don't care what people think about me. Don't care at all. That's the impulsivity that comes with unpacking that kind of trauma. But I just marched right up to him. I interrupted the conversation he was having with the girl he was talking to. And she kind of like felt like, I talked to her later. She was like, there's something like a vibe between you. So she left. And I looked at him and I said, you are so cute. Like, you are so handsome. And again, you are not even supposed to talk like that. It's not allowed at all. And he just smiles and like he had the most like beautiful blue eyes. Like, I still like think about that moment and I get a little bit like, Yeah. And then I just brought him into my group of friends. I had like a really solid group of friends. And little side note, it was the first time that I genuinely had friendships with queer people. Like everybody in my circle was queer. And that I think helped my journey progress a lot because it opened my eyes to different types of relationships, different types of people. One of my friends was trans and one of the only trans people at the center. And so they often felt really isolated. And anyway, so that's a little tidbit. But so I bring him into this group of people now. So like, we did everything together. Like we would walk each other to classes. We would go to lunch. We would this and that. And all I can think about for like a couple days was just, I want to kiss someone so bad. That's all I could think about. So we are sitting outside, this group of friends, and all of them were a couple of them had already kissed. Like they were already rule breakers.
Makes sense.
They were already rule breakers. So I knew that I could trust them and I could bring up this topic without them running and telling somebody because they were doing it too. Or the rebels. I was in the rebel crowd.
Oh, you fell in with the queer rebel crowd.
Yes. So we're just in a group and talking about different things. And I don't even know how we got onto the topic of making out or something. But I look at this boy, name redacted, but I'll call him David. And I just said in the middle of the conversation, I said, I want to make out with you. Do you want to make out with me? And he's like, and he just had this big smile on his face. And he's like, I don't think that would be a good idea. I don't think that's a good idea. And I said, okay, well, just know that I want to.
Slay, that's the kind of confidence every woman deserves to have at all times.
Yes, I had never done anything like that. One thing led to another. We started, after we had dinner in the cafeteria, you had a little bit of like free time. I think you had like a check-in with your other lodge members, and then there was like a snack time, and then you could kind of do what you want. And so David and I, we were going on a walk around the campus, and just picture this: it's the Arizona desert. It's at night. There's a little breeze in the air. And mind you, 21 and I was 30, so it felt even more exciting because of that.
You were 21 in age, realistically.
No, literally. But we had to be very, very sneaky about it. And most people knew, the people that were rebelling knew that there was like a certain area that you could go in on the campus because we all had watches for the center to track where you are. So they had to know where you are at all time. So there was this one pocket where like the watch didn't work or something. We ended up sitting on a bench, and if you can imagine, there's a path kind of in the middle of the rehab center. It's not like it's like an open path. You know, it's kind of shaded or a little bit more, I don't know how to explain it.
You found a private spot.
Yes. So we're sitting on this bench, and there was always a staff member just walking around, always, like keeping an eye out for people that were doing things that they weren't supposed to be doing. So he's like facing, and he can see them like walking, and I can't see anybody. So he just looks at me and he's like, if you want to kiss me, now is the right time to do it. So I literally just went and I just kissed him. And it was absolutely exhilarating. It was so exhilarating. Like I felt on top of the world. And then we just kissed a little bit, and then he just said, come here. And he just grabbed me, and we start walking around the campus, and he grabs me, and then we start walking on the path, and we were kind of, you know, keeping an eye out. I wasn't really sure like what his plan was, but there was no one around, and he literally just pushes me against this wall in a dark corner of the campus, and we just start making out. And I mean, one of the most important parts of that whole rehab experience. And then, I mean, there was a lot that happened after that night that would be like, I feel like way too long to get into, but
yeah, like I'm sure you had to deal with the fallout.
Yes, because we got caught. But before we got caught, we would do the same thing. We would go on walks at night, like before we were supposed to go to bed, and we would do the same thing in the same spot and just make out.
Again, it just makes me so happy for like that little Mormon girl who like I find this story beautiful despite all of the complexity of it.
Yeah, if I'm looking at it objectively and I take out, you know, the fact that I am still very much married, that was an absolutely beautiful experience for me, and it started healing something in me that I was craving for so long, and I didn't know that doing that would kind of ignite that. But it did, and it was really, really necessary for me. Of course, I acknowledge that, I have a husband at home who's taking care of my young kids. Like, there was a ton of guilt because of that, like, understandably. And he's having an experience of his own as I'm away. So it's just not simple, right? It's just not a simple thing.
Which healing almost never is.
No.
The whole reason you were in rehab is because you had been like stuffed into these boxes kind of without consent your whole life. And we don't always get to choose like what happens when you set that free.
No. Especially when you're very mentally ill.
Yeah. You weren't fixed. Like this was during the unraveling. This was part of it. And, you know, in the grand scheme of things, pretty wholesome kissing a guy in rehab.
That's exactly what my therapist said. So I told my therapist right away, which was kind of funny that I did that, but I did. I told her, and she was like, so I didn't mean here. And she said, you know, that's not allowed. Like there was a list of rules that were posted everywhere on the campus. Yeah. And that was one of the most important rules. She said, I'm not going to share this with anybody, but you can't do that again. Yeah. All the while I'm thinking I'm absolutely going to be doing it again. So, you know, the timeline of everything that I'm sharing is very jumbled. But the longer I was there, you know, the more I was unpacking, I was having these intense dissociative episodes where my mind got triggered, and then thought I was 5 years old, and I was having these complete meltdowns, having all these realizations about being sexually abused in being an adult, like sexually harassed, like just everything was coming out. And it caused me, like for a week straight, I was having the most intense dissociative episodes that I've ever had in my entire life. I kind of had elements of them before, but I always forced myself to keep it together. And then I felt so much shame for the way that I acted. And then with this guy that I had kissed, I was kind of on a high because, I have this guy who, like, we're very attracted to each other and we get to kiss each other. And then I have this great group of friends. But then someone found out. It was actually him that told a staff member, and I have a lot of sympathy for this version of me, literally told him, this is part of my therapy. kissing you is part of my therapy. And I said it jokingly, but also like, oh yeah, like, no, this is legit, to kind of like justify what I was doing, and to validate it. So he started getting worried about that, understandably. So he met with a therapist and he just said, I'm getting worried about my friend Cindy. Like this is what she's saying to me. Like he was genuinely like concerned for me. And that staff member said, you are never allowed to speak to her again. You're never allowed to talk. You can't be within 100 yards of her. You can't be in the same room. And it blew up to the point of like, the head people in charge found out about it. And then I had to have a meeting with, I think, like the president and vice president of the center to disclose everything that happened. That was the lowest point, which is crazy because I had gone through so much. But I had this like, I don't know, I had all these like fun hormones going on while I was having that relationship with that guy. So it was kind of clouding what I was really there for. It really did. I was devastated. Like because my anxious attachment wounds set on fire.
Because you suddenly could never see him again.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Suddenly I'm
during the most bonded, like probably the oxytocin was through the roof and then it's like you can never see this.
Exactly. It was like I couldn't eat. Like,
and that's probably why they say don't kiss anyone in rehab.
Exactly. It's true. You shouldn't. But for that small moment in time, it was important. Yeah. But it was good that it was put to an end because then everything just kind of fell apart because he legitimately, they said you were never allowed to talk to him again because you were free to hug people. Like girls could hug boys. Like it didn't matter. They said you are not allowed to touch the opposite gender. You're not allowed to hug them. And they just said basically like you need to keep to yourself. Don't engage in flirty conversation with them. And I was mortified too. I felt so ashamed of what I had done and the fact that these people knew about it. I was just, and so those head people in charge, they left the room and then it was just me and my therapist. And she said, Cindy, I never should have kept that a secret. Like I should have told someone about it when you told me. And then that made me feel even worse. I'm like, girl, well, you didn't.
Yeah. And again, I understand why she would say that, but I just think it's also complicated. And it's also just hard because the rehab has to have standards. It is at the end of the day a rehab. It's not real life. But it's like the brain doesn't work within the confines of like that. To the brain, it's like you're just alive. And this is what your body wants. And this is what your psyche is craving. And you've never kissed anyone except for your husband.
What's it called? Reptilian brain?
Yeah.
Yeah, my reptilian brain.
Yeah.
So then when they, cut him off and then like our group of friends, they had to like choose. Were they going to spend time with him? Oof. Were they going to spend time with me?
Brutal.
And he was still like, I couldn't even say hi to him. I couldn't even like smile at him. Like it was so rough and I felt like, oh, he hates me anyway. So it was catastrophic. And that ignited even more dissociative episodes. And what I mean by episodes is something triggers my brain and then I go into a younger part of myself that wants to throw the biggest tantrum ever. So I had a psychiatrist. I had a psychiatrist that I met with regularly. And after all that happened, I went and I met with him and I was, he even said to me, he's like, you seem different today. And these are the moments where I'm like, oh, my DID. Yeah, for sure. He's like, you're not yourself right now. Because I was angry and I was going to go home. I just thought, this is the end of the road for me. I feel sick to my stomach constantly. I can't eat. Like, I have no one. I truly felt like I had no one at that point. Absolutely no one.
I wish I could go be your friend in rehab.
No, literally. I mean, I still had my friends for sure, but it just changed everything. It changed the whole experience.
And it's so much for you to hold, because like in healing, you do need to like get rid of shame as much as possible. It would be hard to maintain kind of a sense of self-compassion while you're being told you did a really bad thing. I know I just keep saying it's complex, but like it really is.
It truly is.
And the shame's not fair because like even if you did something wrong, it's like, well, then that's data, right? Into the state of your mind at that time that you need to kind of be curious and compassionate about.
Yeah.
To be like, okay, there's clearly something big there because like I did do that and like, let's look at it.
Yeah. And it was when I was disciplined and given new rules I had to follow, it was reminiscent of dating my ex-husband, before we got married and having to like repent about something that was so minute, was so, I mean, thinking about the sexual experiences that I've had up to this point, it's like, oh my God, that was totally
so
normal.
Wholesome.
So it felt reminiscent of that. It felt like my stake president was telling me this, or like my bishop was like, you can't do this and this and this. And again, the shame, like, oh, I feel disgusting. I feel horrible. That was a rock bottom moment. But
which, you know, that
I
can be
needed
useful.
it.
Yeah.
I had to climb myself out of it. You know, after all that went down, I was meeting with my psychiatrist and just was telling him I'm going to go home. And he did something that like changed everything for me. And psychiatrists, I mean, they were mostly just there to talk about your meds. Like this man put so much time and sincerity in helping me. Like he saved my life. Like he helped me save my life. He said that he wanted me to draw what I was feeling. So he just pulled out a blank piece of paper and crayons like I was a little kid, because I was in a younger part of my brain. I was really angry and ashamed. And he just started asking me to draw like, okay, what are you feeling? I think he was talking about like, I think he asked, what does shame look like to you? Can you draw that? As soon as I put the crayon to paper, I just started drawing immediately. Like it was like this part of my brain was unlocked and was expressing itself on paper. And I drew this image of like a very small object and then a million ominous shapes looking down. It was dark. And then he had me draw other things, and then I would hold up the picture that I drew in the mirror, because then we got to me drawing more positive emotions and feelings, because he was trying to change the way I was thinking about myself. And I would hold them up in the mirror and he'd have me say things about myself. I don't really remember, but it was transformative for me.
Why? Why do you think it was transformative?
Because it didn't feel like it was an outside source that was drawing those things. It felt like the authentic 5-year-old that never got to be a 5-year-old. Like I never had an opportunity to be a kid. I didn't know how to be a kid. Plain and simple. It sounds like awful because it is, but it felt like she was feeling seen and heard in a way that she had never before. Like it unlocked, it was just so not surface level. Like what was going on in my body, it felt very deep and very real. It just felt like the most genuine encouragement that me at my core, like I am a wonderful, incredible person. And it didn't feel like it was coming from a church leader, those thoughts. It didn't feel like it was coming from even a friend. It really felt like my true self was coming out of me. And because I had to accept that I didn't have this attachment to this person in rehab anymore, and I was all alone, and I had to validate myself. I had to be the only one to validate myself for the first time. I couldn't rely on anyone else's validation.
Because you're at rock bottom, right? You
Yes.
like lost it all.
Yes. Like to validate my own existence, I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
I didn't understand, because as a kid, I didn't feel real. I remember moments growing up where I was looking at myself in the mirror. I'm like, I don't know who that is. That's a stranger. And I would have these really existential moments of like, what is all this? Like, I didn't feel real because I was dissociating my entire childhood.
Yeah. And you'd never got to develop a sense of self. There wasn't really like a sense of self there to access because you hadn't got to develop it. Like that's the time when it would have been happening, like 5, that's when that's like starting to form.
Right.
And then you're being expected to like be this thing in the world that you're having to like perform. So it's like all you know is like when I'm in the world, I'm performing, and then I look in the mirror and like, what's there? I don't know. There's kind of nothing,
Yeah. And I was just always an object for another person's selfish desires my whole life. And because my life started out that way, it was like I had no ownership over my body. So in that moment in his office, I felt real. It sounds weird, but I just felt like, oh, I exist. I'm a person, and I can tell myself I can validate my own existence. That's okay to do. Because I told him, you know, before I started drawing that like, well, no, I didn't tell him this. In my head, I was thinking, I'm going to leave this place and I'm going to commit suicide. Like, cause I'm done. Like I couldn't handle the pain that I was feeling. My body couldn't comprehend it. But what always kept me not doing that was my daughters. And while I was drawing, like I thought of them a lot as well, because it's almost like if I can't support myself, then how can I look at them in the eyes and support their existence and validate their experience? Yeah. So that was a very big turning point for me. Yeah.
Which, the psyche's so interesting because it's like you had this experience that took you to that place of rock bottom and then gave you that chance to rebuild. So it's like rehab's doing its job, you know?
No, yeah.
And it's unconventional, but yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're in the best place.
Yeah, yeah. And it felt like I lived 7 lifetimes.
Yeah, I bet.
While I was there, because I was tapping into all different ages of myself, you know, the teenage self that's got hormones raging and wants to kiss someone, and the 5-year-old self that is on the floor of my lodge's lobby kicking and screaming, the 12-year-old self that was taken by one of my therapists, took me into the middle of the desert, kind of away from everybody, and just let me rage in the desert because I was so angry. I was so angry that life had brought me to that point. Like it just felt so unfair to me. And I got to throw rocks and I got cuts and bruises, minor cuts and bruises. Like just, it was a mind, body, soul fuck, like through and through.
Genuinely a complete letting go.
Yeah.
To then like find what's real at the center.
Yeah. So I, you know, there's a lot more to the rehab experience, but I mean, as you can imagine, I knew that I couldn't stay married. And the stuff about my concerns about the church came to my mind throughout my time there, but it was more like passing thoughts. Cause again, it's on a shelf. And all of my concerns just melted away because I was surrounded by people that didn't give a fuck if I was Mormon. Didn't give a fuck if I was Mormon. I was surrounded by people that loved me and I loved them and they were not Mormon. It was so hard for me to identify myself outside of it, outside of Mormonism. So to like create an identity for myself and build relationships with people, not based on, oh, are they doing this? Or are they going to help me be a better Mormon? Things like that.
And you never would have had that experience if you hadn't gone to rehab. Again, that just is what is so mind-blowing to me about so many people's situations.
Yeah, I had to go away. I had to be away. If I stayed home and just not gone to rehab, like, I don't think that I would be here, like, legitimately. But yeah, people just, I wasn't reading my scriptures. I wasn't wearing garments. I wasn't attending the temple. I wasn't obeying the word of wisdom. I was drinking coffee every day for the first time in my life, which felt so invigorating. It was so fun. And then I had like decaf coffee at night with like my snack. Like I felt so cool doing that. Like, and no one was there to tell me that I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
You know? And I never really like had like a huge aha moment of being a member of the church. It's just when I, you know, was coming time for me to go home, I just thought in my head like, oh, Mormonism, like I'm not doing that anymore. And it just naturally, as I came home, it was like, I never went back to church, never put on garments again. I never questioned again my decision to go away. And like my decision was incredibly emotions based because I haven't read a ton of church history because a lot of it has to do with child sexual abuse and it's very triggering for me. So my decision wasn't based off that. It was entirely just, I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that people should be able to leave a cult because they don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. There's really no bad reason.
That's it. You don't have to have, and I feel like that more simple reasons for leaving is becoming more acceptable because lots of people have left at this point.
Yeah.
But, you know, a few years ago or so, I just felt like everybody had to give a reason.
Yeah.
Everybody had to say, this is why. And it's just like,
but yeah, you have to like write a 10-page document to your family or you have to justify it with like, I did 5 years of research or.
Right. Like I've shared a ton of things. All of that has to do with what led to me finally breaking away from it. It wasn't like I read this, that did it for me. It's a whole gambit of experiences and feelings and emotions, and I was just tired. I was so tired, and there was just no possible way for me to continue healing while also trying to placate a Mormon God.
Yeah.
It was too much. I needed to just be me. I didn't need to have all the social pressures of being this chapel at this time, or to even pressure to share about the gospel. I didn't have to talk about it incessantly. I didn't have to highlight general conference talks and oh my God, how fucking boring. I'm sorry, but how boring is Mormonism?
And that true version of yourself that you were able to finally make contact with had never been Mormon. So it's you're not having to justify why you're not a Scientologist or a Jehovah's Witness or anything else.
Right.
It's just that's not, you you gave it a good run. You knew as much as anyone could possibly need to know about religion to know that it wasn't for you.
Yeah, and I was so in it. I mean, I was, it caused issues in my marriage because I was so hypervigilant about things. We have to go to the temple every week. We did this, that's so bad. And then I would just spiral into a pit of shame and just I'm disgusting, I'm horrible, and I've got to find a way to rectify this, to repent, and to bring more of the Jesus juice in me. It was just the cycle that just never ended,
Yeah. So you left rehab, not a Mormon, and well, technically still married, but not married, which you didn't go in expecting either of those things.
No.
Which is why I find your story so interesting, because it's just you contacting your true self in rehab and allowing yourself to unravel and finding yourself for the first, it's it was all just, it kind of, in my head, it's it melted away almost, because it just was never... It was never true. It was tied to a story of who you were, but that was never you.
Yeah, it's almost like I was in this really small room that didn't have any windows, and there was one door, and it was I was in this small room with all these different versions of myself that were just scattered. I felt like parts of myself were either with people that I loved or people that loved me, people that have hurt me, or parts of myself were in physical places and that I didn't own those parts. And then when I left, it was I walked out of that room and I took all those parts with me and began my journey of just becoming a whole person and being able to include all of my parts and accept all of them and love all of them and let them live, and I closed that door and I never looked back. And that was it was such a relief. It's this huge weight lifted on. It's I don't have to do it anymore. Of course, that was 2021. I've gone through a lot of things since then. And
yeah, I'm sure, it's not easy to then bring that experience back into your real life.
I was a newborn.
Yeah.
I was a newborn in the world when I came home from rehab,
and even people that haven't had as intense trauma as you, that experience you had of deep contact with your true self is not necessarily common in our society. So it's not you can just expect to waltz back into your life and everyone to be oh yeah, cool, totally get it. That's amazing that you've come that far.
Yes.
It's just, it's going to just be something you have to kind of hold firm to by yourself, I imagine, in so many ways.
Yeah, the self that I was able to yank out of me was, and sometimes to my detriment, just extremely confident now, and no one was going to stop me from changing my life. No one was going to stop me. And that did cause me to be impulsive in ways and to handle things,
Pendulum swinging is so normal when if you're coming from a place of repression your whole life. Of course, there's going to be some finding your edges and going past them. And
I made out with a guy in rehab. But when I came home, I was a completely different person. My brain was altered completely.
Yeah.
I had a new brain. It was wild. And when I look at pictures of myself, before, I was dead inside. There was someone trapped in that body that was just dying to come out, but couldn't. So it just continued to die and to dull. And yeah, so my sister even told me, like, when I came home and I was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm getting a divorce. I'm no longer Mormon. I'm moving here, like whatever. And she even said to me, she's like, she didn't tell me this until a while later. She said, I was scared of you when you got home because, and not necessarily in a negative way, but I no longer was in the role that she was used to me being in.
Yeah.
Where I felt like I needed so much validation from the people closest to me, and I needed a ton of guidance and support. And I still did. And my family, I mean, so many people supported me while I was in rehab, but she, just the point of her saying, like, I was scared of you because you were so different. And I mean, it just speaks to the transformation that I was so privileged to go through. And that was absolutely necessary for my well-being and for my overall quality of life. It was very riveting, very riveting.
Yeah. And also, not that your sister was necessarily like this phenomenon, but I do think if every woman in the world, and maybe people in general, but if every woman in the world suddenly kind of woke up to their own power, it would scare a lot of people. Like our society is still very threatened by a woman who's just like, I'm going to do things because I want to do them. And we have this idea that means she'll become selfish and evil and blah, 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 blah. It's not true. Like most people have a ton of empathy for others when they truly when you can really access yourself in like a loving, like more complete way and feel so much empathy for yourself, you feel a lot of empathy for others. You don't want to just go around like hurting people. But we all have this idea that like shame and containment is what's like keeping us from going off the rails. But I really do think, and this is why I think I have so much empathy for your questionable decisions in rehab, is I'm like, I think a lot of people need to go off the rails. Maybe not like that, but you know.
No,
like,
I wish.
We all have our ways we need to burst out of our boxes. And I'm like, if it gets you there, fair enough. It's not always neat and tidy.
I wish every young mother had an opportunity to do something like that.
Or before, you know.
Or before. Yeah. I've had conversations with people where, I don't know, they've just been over the last few years talking to someone who's a bit younger than me that's like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to have children eventually or whatever. And I said, here's my suggestion. Figure yourself out first and then think about that later. Because I would have wanted to do the same thing.
Yeah.
I wish everybody got to have that experience of going away. And I got so much out of it because it was entirely my choice. I think that played a big part in it.
Yeah.
And I also felt this necessary pressure of, I'm not going to be able to do this again. Like I can't be like in and out of rehab.
Yeah.
Throughout life. I can't. Like I gotta do everything now. I would go again. Like I would go again.
I know. I'm like, heartbeat. I want to go to a fancy treatment center.
No, like I would go again in a heartbeat, but
I'm so glad you did. And I'm so glad that you're now sharing on your own YouTube channel.
I know. And the other thing I was going to mention is that now that I wasn't Mormon when I came home, it opened me up to like reignite friendships from the past. Like we met up and we had dinner and like we had never really like hung out a ton. We kind of faded over the years. Like we both got married. We both, we're going through life. But I got to reconnect with people that I did know in my former Mormon life, but maybe I was like scared to connect with or felt like I couldn't connect with. But now that I was this new person, my relationships totally changed.
Yeah.
And as it should.
Yeah.
If you go through that and if you really want to heal, like pretty much everything should change in your life.
Yeah, we're really scared of change because we think that like constancy is what keeps us safe. But I really think embracing change as a thing that is constantly happening, because it is. Of course, the camera died. So we're back for the outro. And if you want to hear more of Cindy, you can go to her channel.
Yes.
Please
subscribe to my channel. I still feel weird saying that, but
no, we all deserve to make minimum wage on YouTube for sharing our most vulnerable.
Yeah, I'm unemployed as fuck. I've had a lot of struggles with jobs over the last couple of years, and my genuine desire is to do something like this.
I really felt like you're a natural orator and someone who, you make sense as a content creator for me.
Yeah, so go follow my page. I just made a video talking about how dating in Utah is a joke and shared some really fun stories. So
eating raw liver on a first date, you don't hear that one that much.
No.
I love your videos. I'm excited to see where your channel goes.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that.
This has been so much fun.
I know it's not an easy thing to talk about, and I'm hoping that it's like my story is very different from yours, and yet I relate to it so deeply.
The elements are there.
The elements are there, and I
Yeah.
feel like we've had a sort of similar spiritual awakening, if you want to call it that. You know, that is a
absolutely.
spiritual awakening. And yeah,
And look at us now.
look at us
Look at us now.
You're not even blonde anymore.
We're here on a YouTube channel that's very much ex-Mormon.
We have 5 cats between us. Sometimes they all live with me. Jared says so close. Really quick. Also, if you want to support this channel, we're on Patreon. I'm really trying to go harder on content. So if you want to support me and Tana and our whole operation here, that's where you can go. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Hello, Jared. Perfect timing.